Hi, and welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and I'm really glad you're here. Today's episode is all about something that seems small, but actually has a big impact on your confidence when speaking English. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a conversation trying your best to follow along and then suddenly said, "I don't understand," and everything just stopped? It's something I hear all the time from learners. You're in the middle of a chat, maybe with a colleague, a new friend, or even someone online, and then you hit a wall. You don't get a word, or maybe the sentence feels too fast. And before you even think twice, you say, "I don't understand." And boom, the conversation ends there. The other person might pause or start over from the beginning or just give up. And suddenly, that moment of learning or connection is gone. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with not understanding something. It's completely normal. It happens to all of us, even fluent speakers, when we hear a strong accent or an unfamiliar phrase. But the problem isn't about not understanding, it's about how we respond when it happens. That's what we're going to talk about today. So I want to start with a small idea that can make a big difference. Saying, "I don't understand," is like hitting the brakes on a conversation. It often makes the other person stop talking, or change the subject, or assume you can't keep going. But when you learn some better ways to respond, ways that keep the conversation open, even when you're lost for a moment, you'll feel more confident, and the person you're speaking with will feel more comfortable too. Let me tell you about Sandra. She's from Milan, Italy. She told me that every time she had meetings with her team, mostly people from London and Dublin, she would feel nervous. Whenever someone used a fast expression or an idiom, she froze and said, "I don't understand." People would stop, try to rephrase, and sometimes even skip her turn in the discussion. After a few weeks, she started feeling invisible. Not because she couldn't understand, but because she was unintentionally signaling that she wasn't ready to continue. What Sandra really needed was a way to stay in the conversation, even if she didn't catch every word. Once she learned to say things like, "Sorry, could you say that in another way?" or "I didn't catch that last part," people responded completely differently. They slowed down a bit or rephrased gently, and she stayed part of the flow. Her confidence started to grow, all because she stopped using a phrase that closed the door and started using ones that kept it open. And let me just pause here for a second to say, if this kind of tip sounds helpful to you, if you've ever felt like Sandra, like you're falling behind just because of one sentence, then this episode is really for you. And if you want more ideas like this, simple, useful, and easy to apply, go ahead and follow this podcast or leave a like wherever you're listening. It helps us reach more learners around the world who need exactly this kind of support. And honestly, I'd love to have you with us for the next episodes too. Okay, back to it. Let's take a step back and think, why do we say "I don't understand" so quickly? Well, it's often a mix of fear and habit. When we don't understand something, our brain panics a little. We feel pressure to say something, to explain our confusion. And "I don't understand" feels like the fastest, clearest option. It's simple, it's honest, but it's also a full stop. Now imagine if we could replace that habit with one that's just as honest, but more helpful. That's the real goal today. I'm not here to tell you to pretend you understand. Never. I'm here to help you keep learning in the moment. Because every time you stay in the conversation, you get a chance to learn something new. And every time you shut it down, you lose that chance. I remember another learner, Koji, from Tokyo. He works in a global IT company, and every week he joins video calls with teammates in Toronto and Berlin. In the beginning, Koji always said, "I don't understand," when someone used casual English or slang. One day, his teammate said, "This feature is a game changer." And Koji stopped the meeting for a moment to say, "I don't understand." The conversation slowed down, the energy dropped, and later he told me he felt like he had done something wrong. But he hadn't. He just didn't have the tools yet. I asked Koji to try a different response next time. Something like, "Can you give me an example of that?" Or, "I'm not familiar with that phrase. What does it mean?" These kinds of responses still show you're engaged, you're learning, you're curious, and that changes everything. So here's the big idea I want you to carry with you today. There is nothing wrong with being confused. What matters is how you respond to that moment of confusion. And if you can replace one habit, just one phrase, you'll open up a whole new level of communication. Not perfect communication, not fast communication, but real, human, growing communication. Think about your own experience for a second. When was the last time you said, "I don't understand"? What happened after that? Did the conversation continue? Did the other person help you? Or did things stop there? This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Once you notice how often you use that phrase, you can start to catch yourself and try something different. And that's where real change begins. You're not alone in this. Every learner goes through it. Even I've been there when learning other languages. I know how it feels. That's why I'm here, to help you find small, practical ways to make English more comfortable, more natural, and less scary. And that's what we'll be doing today. I'll walk you through some easy alternatives to "I don't understand" that you can use right away. Not fancy expressions, not textbook grammar. Just clear, simple phrases that help you stay in the conversation and keep your confidence strong. Let's get started. Let me tell you something that I've noticed after years of working with English learners from all over the world. One of the most common phrases I hear in conversations, especially when someone feels unsure or confused, is "I don't understand." Now, don't get me wrong, this phrase isn't incorrect. It's grammatically fine. But the real problem is how it affects the flow of communication. Every time someone says, "I don't understand," it's like the air changes in the room. There's a pause, a sudden feeling of tension, and sometimes the conversation just stops right there. I've seen this happen in so many situations. A learner is doing great, listening, nodding, maybe even responding in short phrases. But then the other person says something they didn't quite catch. Instead of staying engaged, they drop this sentence, "I don't understand." And boom, the whole interaction slows down or even ends. The other person may not know what to do next. Should they repeat everything? Should they change the subject? Should they speak in simpler English? The conversation loses its natural rhythm. And here's the tricky part. Even though the learner is just being honest, trying to express confusion or ask for help, the phrase "I don't understand" can sometimes sound final. It doesn't invite the speaker to help you. It doesn't give any clue about what the problem actually is. Are you confused by one word? Did you not catch the whole sentence? Do you need them to speak more slowly? The phrase doesn't offer any direction. It's like a dead end. And when conversations hit dead ends, they often don't recover. Another issue is the emotional impact of saying this phrase over and over again. I've heard learners say it with frustration in their voice, sometimes even with embarrassment. Imagine being in a group of native speakers, trying your best to follow along, and every few minutes you find yourself saying, "I don't understand." That repetition creates a pattern in your brain. You start associating conversations in English with failure or discomfort. You begin to feel like you're always behind, always missing something. That feeling can grow over time, making you less and less likely to speak up or participate. Even worse, people around you may misinterpret your intention. They might think you're not paying attention, or they might believe you're not interested in what they're saying. I've seen this happen too. A student says, "I don't understand," and the other person assumes they've lost interest or aren't trying hard enough. That's not fair, of course, but it happens. Communication is about more than words. It's about the energy you bring, the curiosity you show, and the way you invite the other person to continue talking. "I don't understand" doesn't do any of that. It shuts the door instead of opening it. Now I completely get it. When you're lost in a conversation, your brain panics. You feel this rush of pressure, like you have to say something quickly. "I don't understand" becomes your go-to response. It's fast, it's easy, and you hope it will fix the problem. But the truth is, it rarely does. It might stop the immediate discomfort, but it also stops the learning. Every time you say it and the conversation ends or moves on without clarification, you miss a chance to grow. You miss a chance to practice a real-life situation where English gets messy and unpredictable. And those moments are exactly the ones that help you improve. Sometimes learners tell me, "But Julia, if I don't understand, what else can I say?" That's the heart of it, right? Most people use I don't understand because they don't know what else to do. They're not trying to be negative. They're trying to survive in the moment. And that's okay. I'm not here to judge or criticize anyone for using the phrase. I'm here to show you that there are better, more useful ways to respond. But first, I want you to really recognize how much power your words have. A small change in how you express confusion can make a big difference in how others respond to you and how you feel about yourself as an English speaker. The problem with I don't understand isn't just about language, it's also about confidence. It sends a message to your own brain that you've reached your limit, that you can't go any further. But most of the time, that's not true. Maybe you missed one word. Maybe the sentence was too fast. Maybe the topic is unfamiliar. Those are all specific, solvable problems. But when you say, I don't understand, you group all of those challenges into one big wall, and you stop trying to climb it. It's a habit. And like any habit, it can be changed. But the first step is awareness. I want you to think back to the last time you said this phrase. What was happening? What exactly didn't you understand? And how did the conversation go after that? If you can start noticing these patterns in your real interactions, you'll be able to catch yourself before you fall into that automatic response again. Also, let's be real. Native speakers don't always speak clearly. They use idioms, slang, incomplete sentences, and fast speech. It's completely normal to feel confused sometimes. The goal isn't to understand everything. The goal is to stay in the conversation, even when it's hard. And saying, I don't understand, pulls you out of the moment. It creates distance. That's the opposite of what you want. You want connection. You want progress. You want to be part of the exchange, not standing outside of it. And finally, I just want to say, it's okay to be confused. It's okay not to get everything. You are learning, and that means you're going to face challenges. What matters is how you respond to those moments. Do you freeze up and stop trying? Or do you stay curious and ask for help in a way that keeps the energy alive? You have more control than you think. And when you stop relying on, I don't understand as your default response, you open up so many new possibilities for interaction, learning, and growth. That's the beginning of a real transformation in how you use English. When I first met Luca, he was feeling completely stuck. He's an IT professional from Milan, working in a growing international company with colleagues from Germany, the United States, Brazil, and India. Most of the meetings were held in English. At first, he was excited about the opportunity to practice and improve, but that excitement quickly turned into frustration. After every meeting, he would close his laptop and feel like he hadn't contributed anything meaningful. Not because he didn't have good ideas. Luca is sharp, experienced, and always prepared, but because he kept hitting the same wall over and over again. That wall was the phrase, I don't understand. Every time someone said something that was too fast, too complex, or filled with unfamiliar expressions, Luca would default to that sentence. I don't understand. Sometimes he would say it quietly. Other times he would type it in the chat. Occasionally, he would just shake his head or avoid commenting altogether. He thought he was being honest and clear, which in some ways he was. But what he didn't realize is that repeating I don't understand was creating a barrier, not just for him, but for how others perceived him. In one meeting, his manager presented a new system architecture, and halfway through, Luca interrupted with a hesitant, sorry, I don't understand. The room went silent for a second. His manager tried to rephrase, but the momentum was lost. After the call, one of his teammates messaged him privately. Do you need help understanding the diagram? Luca did understand parts of it, but he wasn't sure about one small detail. Yet the way he had said it made it seem like he didn't grasp any of it. That kept happening. Little by little, people stopped asking for his input. They assumed he wasn't following. He started being left out of small planning discussions. Not intentionally, but simply because people thought he wasn't ready to engage. I remember him telling me, Julia, it's like I press a button that shuts the door. Every time I speak, I just say, I don't understand. And suddenly I feel invisible. That hit me hard because I've seen this happen so often. Not just with Luca, but with so many learners who are actually capable and smart. They just haven't learned how to stay in the conversation when things get difficult. So we started working on that. The first step was to replace the habit. Instead of defaulting to, I don't understand, I asked him to get curious. We practiced different phrases that kept the conversation alive instead of stopping it. I told him, you don't have to understand everything right away. You just have to stay open and engaged. So instead of saying, I don't understand, he started saying, can you go over that last part again? Or, do you mean the new server will replace the old one completely? These questions gave people something to work with. They showed that he was trying, that he was thinking. At first, he was nervous about sounding silly or making mistakes. But after just 2 weeks of trying these new strategies, something changed. In one meeting, someone mentioned a term he didn't know: redundancy protocol. Instead of freezing, he calmly asked, sorry, when you say redundancy protocol, are you referring to the backup server? The answer was yes, and the conversation moved on naturally. He stayed in the discussion. He didn't lose his place. More importantly, his colleagues began to look at him differently. They saw that he was not lost. He was involved. The feedback was almost immediate. His manager complimented him on being more vocal. A teammate thanked him after a meeting for clarifying a point that others were also unsure about. That's another thing. When you ask a thoughtful question, chances are you're helping someone else too. Luca's confidence started to grow. He stopped muting his microphone so often. He even started volunteering to explain parts of the project to new team members. What made the biggest difference wasn't just language. It was mindset. Luca stopped seeing misunderstanding as a failure and started treating it as part of the process. He realized that in an international team, everyone is learning all the time, not just the non-native speakers. Even native speakers misinterpret things, ask for clarification, or admit when something isn't clear. That realization took the pressure off. He began to enjoy meetings instead of dreading them. I remember asking him one day, what's changed for you the most? And he said, now I feel like I belong in the conversation. That's powerful, because that's what language is about. It's not about getting every word right. It's about connection, presence, and courage. Luca still makes mistakes. We all do. But now, he knows how to stay present in the moment, how to ask for help in a way that invites dialogue instead of shutting it down. If you've ever felt like Luca, like you're disappearing in meetings or being misunderstood, you're not alone. And you don't have to stay stuck in that pattern. The words you choose matter. When you say, I don't understand, people may back away. But when you say, can you explain that part again? Or, just to be sure, are you saying that? You show initiative. You show that you're part of the team. You don't need perfect grammar for that. You just need awareness and the willingness to try something new. This kind of shift doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with small steps. Replacing just one phrase can open new doors. For Luca, that change turned silence into participation, confusion into clarity, and hesitation into confidence. It can do the same for you. I want to share something that has made a huge difference for so many English learners I've worked with, and it might completely change how you feel in conversations. It's about the power of simplicity. A lot of people think that to sound fluent in English, you need to use complex sentences, advanced vocabulary, or perfect grammar. But the truth is, in real conversations, whether you're in a meeting, on a phone call, or just chatting with someone, what really matters is clarity. And clarity often comes from using simple, specific phrases that keep the conversation flowing. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone says something too fast, or the audio cuts out for a second, and you didn't understand what they said. Many learners freeze in that moment. They feel nervous or embarrassed and say nothing, or they just nod, pretending they understood. But there's a much better way to handle it. Instead of saying, I don't understand, which can shut down the conversation, you can say something like, sorry, I didn't catch that. It's a small change, but it makes a huge difference. When you say, I didn't catch that, you're telling the other person, I'm listening. I care about what you said. I just need you to repeat it. That sounds more natural, more polite, and it encourages the other person to help you continue the conversation. It doesn't make you sound less intelligent. On the contrary, it makes you sound more involved. There's another phrase I love. Could you say that again? It's simple, direct, and very effective. It doesn't create any awkwardness. In fact, most native speakers use this exact phrase all the time. You'll hear it everywhere, in offices, in shops, on the street. People use it when they miss a word or two, and it's completely normal. When you start using it, you'll notice something important. People respond better to you. They speak more clearly, they appreciate your honesty, and you start feeling more in control of the conversation. Sometimes learners try to translate polite expressions from their native language into English. That can lead to long, complicated questions that sound a bit unusual to native speakers. For example, someone might say, "Excuse me, I couldn't quite understand what you were trying to say in that last sentence." It's not wrong, but it feels a bit heavy. Native speakers usually go with, "Sorry, what was that?" or "Come again," or even just "Pardon." These short phrases keep the rhythm of the conversation going. They don't interrupt the flow. They just give you a moment to catch up. I often remind my students, simplicity isn't about dumbing things down. It's about being efficient, respectful, and connected. Think about how children learn language. They start with short, clear phrases. "I want that. What's this? Help me." These expressions are powerful because they're easy to understand and easy to respond to. As adults, we don't have to complicate everything to sound smart. We just need to communicate clearly. Another benefit of using simple phrases is that they give you time. When you're in a conversation and you don't understand something, a short phrase like, "Could you repeat that part?" or "Did you say?" gives your brain a moment to process. It buys you a few seconds to think, and that reduces pressure. You're no longer frozen, trying to come up with a perfect sentence. You have a tool, something you can say that feels natural and confident. Let's also talk about how these phrases show your attitude. When you say, "Do you mean?" or "Just to make sure I understood," you're showing that you're engaged, you're participating in the conversation, not just reacting to it. That builds relationships. People love to see that you're trying. They don't care if your grammar isn't perfect. They care that you're present. And that's why clarity is more powerful than perfection. You might make a small grammar mistake, but if the other person understands you and the conversation keeps going, you're winning. You're learning, you're connecting, and you're improving every time you speak. That's so much more valuable than trying to say one perfect sentence and then staying quiet for the rest of the conversation. Sometimes I ask my students to practice these phrases out loud. Try saying them now with me. "Sorry, I didn't catch that." "Could you say that again? What does that mean? Do you mean that? Could you explain that part one more time?" These are tools you can use every single day. The more you use them, the more natural they'll feel. You don't have to memorize fancy vocabulary lists. Just keep these phrases in your pocket and bring them out when you need them. You might be surprised at how often native speakers use similar expressions. I've sat in meetings with Americans, Australians, Brits, and they all use these simple tools to clarify meaning. You're not the only one who needs to ask for repetition or clarification. We all do. It's just part of communication. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation and you don't understand something, don't panic, don't go silent. Just use one of these phrases. You'll feel more confident, and you'll be training your brain to stay active in the conversation. You're not stepping back, you're stepping in. You're taking ownership of your communication, and that's a big step toward fluency. Simple language opens doors. It invites people in. And when you speak simply and clearly, you give yourself the best chance to connect, to learn, and to grow. That's the kind of English that matters. Not the textbook perfect sentences, but the ones that keep the conversation going. That's what I want you to remember. Let me tell you a story about someone I once worked with. Her name is May, and she's from Shanghai. She was a university student, bright and hardworking, studying international business. She had a deep interest in learning English because she knew how important it was for her future. But there was a problem. Despite years of studying grammar, vocabulary, and passing all her English exams, May was terrified of speaking in class. Every time the professor asked a question or encouraged students to join the discussion, she would lower her eyes and hope she wouldn't be noticed. It wasn't because she didn't know the answer. She usually did. It was fear. Fear of making a mistake. Fear of being judged. fear of looking foolish in front of her classmates. This fear wasn't just in her head. In her experience, people sometimes giggled when someone made a pronunciation mistake or got a word wrong. That made her even more hesitant. So, instead of participating, she stayed quiet. Even when she didn't understand what someone said, she wouldn't ask for clarification. She just nodded, pretended she understood, and hoped it wouldn't matter. Later, but it always did, she would go home feeling frustrated, confused, and isolated. It affected her confidence not only in English, but in her ability to connect with others. One day, during a one-on-one language support session, she opened up about her struggles. She said, "I feel like I have to understand everything perfectly. If I ask someone to repeat, they will think I'm not smart." I listened, and then I asked her, "What do you usually say when you don't understand something?" She replied quietly, "I don't say anything. I just pretend I understand." That's when I realized something important. No one had ever taught her how to ask for clarification in a way that felt natural, polite, and safe. No one told her that it was okay not to understand everything the first time, that it's completely normal, even for native speakers. So, we started small. I introduced her to a few simple phrases, things like, "I'm not sure I got that. Could you say it again?" Or, "Sorry, I didn't catch that." We practiced those lines again and again, using different situations: a classroom, a coffee, shop, a job interview. We didn't just repeat the phrases. We worked on saying them with the right tone, relaxed and friendly. At first, she was still hesitant. She felt awkward using them. But then, something changed. The more she used those phrases, the more she realized they gave her power. Power to stay in the conversation. Power to show interest. Power to learn and grow without shame. One day, she told me she finally used one of the phrases in class. Her professor had said something quickly, and instead of pretending to understand, she raised her hand slightly and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Can you repeat it?" Her heart was pounding, but she did it. And guess what? The professor smiled, repeated the sentence, and a few other students nodded too. They hadn't understood either. May realized in that moment that asking wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of engagement. It showed she cared. It showed she was listening. And slowly, the fear started to lose its grip. Week by week, she began participating more. She asked questions, offered her opinion, and even corrected herself mid-sentence without embarrassment. Her classmates started turning to her for help because they noticed she was actively involved. She wasn't just surviving in her English classes anymore. She was thriving. And it all started with learning one phrase, one tool that gave her the permission to stay present and connected instead of shutting down. What struck me most about May's story is how something so small can create a huge shift. She didn't need a perfect accent. She didn't need 100 advanced vocabulary words. She just needed the confidence to say, "I'm not sure I understood. Can you say that again?" That one sentence opened doors for her. It made her feel like she belonged in the conversation. And once she saw that the world wouldn't fall apart when she made a mistake, she stopped being afraid of asking. She stopped being afraid of speaking. I remember one moment vividly. We were doing a mock group discussion to prepare for a presentation. May was leading the group, assigning roles, asking others what they thought, responding to different points, all in English. She stumbled once or twice, sure, but she laughed it off and kept going. Afterward, I asked her how she felt. She said, "I used to think I had to speak perfectly or say nothing, but now I know I can be clear without being perfect. And if I don't understand, I can just ask." That mindset changed everything for her. And honestly, it's something I wish more learners could understand. You don't have to wait until you feel ready. You don't have to avoid every situation that feels a little uncomfortable. You just need a few good phrases and the courage to use them. May's story is not unique. There are so many people like her, holding back, not because they don't care or because they're not capable, but because they're afraid of being judged. If that's something you relate to, I want you to know this. Learning how to ask is just as important as learning how to answer. You have every right to ask someone to slow down, repeat, or explain. You have every right to be part of the conversation. It doesn't matter if you're a student, a professional, or someone just starting out. Asking for clarity is a strength, not a weakness. May proved that to herself, and she's never gone back to silence. She found her voice, and now she uses it with confidence. Let me tell you something that can truly change the way you participate in conversations in English. One of the biggest misconceptions many learners have is thinking they must either understand everything perfectly or say, "I don't understand." That mindset stops a lot of real progress. I've seen it happen many times, and I understand why it happens. You don't want to look confused or lost. You don't want to slow down the person speaking. But here's the truth. In real-life conversations, showing that you understand part of what someone said is not only acceptable, it's smart and it's powerful. If you just say, "I don't understand," the conversation can hit a wall. The other person might not know how to help you, or they might assume you're completely lost. But when you show that you understand a bit and point to the exact part that confuses you, you give the conversation a new direction. You show that you're paying attention, and more importantly, you stay part of the dialogue. Let's say someone is explaining something to you, and you catch the first part of their sentence, but then they say something unfamiliar. Instead of shutting down, try saying, "I understood the beginning, but what did you mean by that last word?" It's such a small change, but it completely shifts the energy. You're no longer someone who's struggling. You're someone who's engaged and curious. That matters a lot. Or maybe you're following a conversation, but then the topic changes suddenly. That happens often, especially in group settings. Instead of just nodding and hoping it makes sense later, you can say, "I follow you, but I'm not clear on this part." It's polite, it's honest, and it shows that you're making a real effort to stay with the group. People appreciate that. When I started learning my second language, I used to freeze when I didn't catch every single word. It made me feel like I wasn't ready to speak. But over time, I learned something very freeing. You don't need to understand everything to participate. You just need to understand enough, and you need to know how to express that partial understanding in a smart way. That's what keeps the conversation going. Let me give you some phrases that you can use in these moments. They're simple, but they work. Try saying, "I'm with you so far, but could you explain that part again?" Or, "I understand most of it, but I'm confused about this one thing." These expressions help the speaker see exactly where you need support. That way, they don't have to guess what went wrong, and you get the help you actually need. Another good one is, "I think I get what you're saying, but can you give an example?" That phrase is gold. It shows that you're trying to connect the idea with something real. And when someone gives you an example, it often makes everything click into place. You're learning, you're asking for support, but you're not stopping the conversation or apologizing for not being perfect. Sometimes, especially in group discussions or online classes, it helps to say something like, "I'm not sure I followed that part. Could you go over it again briefly?" That sounds polite and confident at the same time. It tells the speaker you care enough to want clarity and that you're not afraid to ask for it. Now think about the difference between saying, "I don't understand," and "I understood the first part, but I'm lost here." The first one closes the door. The second one opens a window. It invites help without making it look like you're giving up. That's the kind of impression you want to give, especially when you're learning in a professional or academic environment. This is especially important if you're in situations where English is spoken quickly or in different accents. Let's say someone's telling a story and you miss a key detail. Instead of interrupting with, "Sorry, I don't understand," try saying, "I caught most of that, but can you repeat what happened after?" It shows you're listening and just need a little clarification. People respond well to that. They see that you're trying, and they usually want to help. And if you're watching a video or listening to a podcast and you don't get a certain word or phrase, don't focus on what you missed. Focus on what you did understand. You can even take notes like, "Understood this part, didn't get that phrase, look it up later." That mindset keeps your confidence up and helps you move forward. Also, think about your tone. When you use these phrases, say them calmly and naturally. There's no need to sound nervous or apologetic. Just be honest and respectful. Saying, "I think I'm getting it, but I'm still a little unsure about this part," is totally okay. It makes you sound thoughtful, and most of the time, the other person will admire your willingness to engage. In conversations with native speakers, this strategy is especially useful. They often speak fast and use idioms or casual expressions. You might hear something like, "Let's circle back to that later," and you're not sure what it means. That's your moment to say, "I understood the rest." But what does circle back mean? Now, you're not only learning a phrase, you're building confidence and trust in the interaction. These moments of partial understanding are not signs of weakness. They're opportunities. They show that you're present, that you're paying attention, and that you care about getting it right. That's a huge part of fluency. Not just speaking without mistakes, but managing conversations in a way that keeps them moving forward. So next time you're in a conversation and you start to feel unsure, stop yourself from saying, "I don't understand." Instead, pause and ask yourself, "What do I understand?" Then build from there. Use one of these phrases to express that partial understanding and keep going. You'll notice a difference in how people respond to you, and more importantly, you'll notice a difference in how you feel about your own ability to communicate in English. Let me tell you about Aisha, a bright and determined entrepreneur from Nairobi. She had been running her own small tech company and was starting to gain recognition in her field. As part of her journey, she was invited to several international events, conferences, and pitch competitions. These were incredible opportunities for her to meet investors, collaborate with other entrepreneurs, and share her ideas with the world. But there was one challenge that kept getting in her way: the language barrier. Aisha spoke English, yes, but she often felt unsure about some of the complex terms or fast-paced conversations during the events. In the beginning, whenever she didn't fully grasp what someone was saying, she would simply say, "I don't understand." It was honest, of course. But over time, she started to notice something. Whenever she said those words, conversations would often stop. The other person would either try to simplify everything too much, or they would change the topic entirely. She felt like people were seeing her not as a capable businesswoman, but as someone who wasn't ready to be in those spaces. And that hurt. Because she was ready, she just needed a better way to stay in the conversation, even when she didn't catch every single word. One day, after a particularly frustrating networking session, Aisha sat down and reflected. She realized she wasn't actually completely lost during those conversations. Most of the time, she understood the general idea. It was just certain words, or maybe the way someone phrased something, that made her feel unsure. So she thought, what if instead of stepping back, she leaned in? What if she showed that she was following, but needed a little help to fully connect the dots? That's when she decided to change her approach. Instead of saying, "I don't understand," she started saying things like, "I think I get the idea, but could you explain that last part again?" Or, "I understand most of what you're saying, but what did you mean by that term?" At her next event, she put this into practice. She was in a small breakout group, and someone was presenting a case study. There was a section that involved technical jargon she wasn't familiar with. Her old instinct would have been to smile and nod or say she didn't understand and go quiet. But this time she spoke up. She said, "I think I'm following, but could you clarify what you meant by scalable infrastructure?" And the reaction was completely different. The speaker didn't pause awkwardly or move on. Instead, he smiled and explained the term in a friendly, professional tone. Others in the group joined in, adding their own experiences with the concept. Aisha wasn't just back in the conversation, she was in the center of it. That one sentence turned a confusing moment into an opportunity for engagement. More importantly, it showed everyone that she was paying attention, thinking critically, and genuinely interested in learning more. From that day on, Aisha continued to use this strategy. Each time she asked a clarifying question, she felt more respected. Other entrepreneurs started approaching her more often, seeing her as curious, thoughtful, and open-minded. Investors appreciated that she didn't pretend to know everything, but also didn't shrink away from what she didn't know. She started having richer, more valuable conversations, and in those conversations, she discovered partnerships, ideas, and support that helped her grow her business beyond what she thought possible. There was one moment that really stuck with her. She was in a panel discussion, and the moderator used a phrase that wasn't common in her region. Instead of staying quiet, Aisha leaned in and said, "I've never heard that expression before. Could you explain what it means in this context?" The room chuckled gently, not in a mocking way, but because of her confidence and honesty. The moderator smiled and explained it, and the discussion went on. Later, someone approached her and said, "I'm so glad you asked that question. I didn't understand it either, but I was too afraid to ask." Aisha realized then that her small act of curiosity had helped not just her, but others in the room too. What I love about Aisha's story is that it shows how powerful it can be to admit when something isn't completely clear without completely stepping out of the conversation. It's not about pretending to understand everything. It's about showing that you want to understand, that you're listening, and that you care about getting it right. That level of engagement builds trust. It encourages dialogue, and it keeps communication flowing in a natural, respectful way. So many of us fear those moments when we don't understand something in English. We worry that people will judge us or think we're not smart. But in reality, when we say, "I don't understand," it can sometimes make us seem closed off, like we're not willing to meet the other person halfway. But when we shift that message and say, "I get the main idea, but I'm not sure about this part," we're telling the other person, "I'm with you. I'm trying. Let's keep going together." That simple shift changes everything. Aisha's story reminds me that English, like any language, is not just about words and grammar. It's about connection. It's about relationships. And the way we express our understanding, especially when that understanding isn't perfect, can be one of the most human, powerful parts of communication. I always tell learners, don't wait until your English is perfect to participate. Use what you know, be honest about what you don't, and most importantly, stay present. When you do that, you not only grow your confidence, but you also earn respect. Just like Aisha did. When you're learning English, there are moments when something just doesn't click. You hear a word, a phrase, maybe even an entire sentence, and you freeze. Your instinct is to say, "I don't understand." And while that phrase is perfectly okay, it's grammatically correct and gets the point across, it can sometimes end the conversation instead of helping it move forward. Over time, I've learned that there are much better ways to keep the flow going, to stay engaged, and to show curiosity even when you're confused. Today, I want to share with you some phrases that I've taught to many English learners. Phrases that are simple, direct, and extremely helpful when you're not quite following along but still want to be part of the conversation. One of the most effective alternatives is, "Could you rephrase that?" This question is polite, clear, and keeps the other person talking. When you say, "I don't understand," the other person might stop or simplify too much. But when you ask them to rephrase, you're asking for the same information in a different form. You're showing that you're trying. You're saying, "I'm listening, I care about what you're saying, and I want to get it." And that makes a big difference. People are often happy to rephrase something, especially if they see that you're actively engaged. Another great phrase is, "Can you give me an example? This one is gold." Sometimes you don't need a definition. You just need to see how something works in a real context. If someone uses a word or expression you don't know, asking for an example gives you a concrete image. It helps you connect the language to something real, and it invites the other person to tell you a story or describe a situation. That often makes the conversation even more interesting. Plus, this question shows that you're not afraid to ask for help, but you're doing it in a way that's constructive and positive. One more useful phrase is, "What does that mean exactly?" This question is especially good when you sort of understand the general idea, but you want more clarity. Maybe someone said something like, "He threw in the towel," and you think it means he gave up, but you're not completely sure. Instead of saying, "I don't understand," you can say, "What does that mean exactly?" It invites the speaker to explain without assuming you know nothing. It keeps the respect in the conversation and gives you the information you need. Let's imagine a situation. You're at work and your colleague says, "We need to pivot the project strategy." You pause. You've heard pivot before in other contexts, but you're not sure what it means here. Instead of freezing or nodding without understanding, you can simply say, "Could you rephrase that?" Or, "What exactly do you mean by pivot in this case?" These questions are respectful and focused. They don't signal weakness. They signal that you are attentive and want to understand deeply. Sometimes when someone speaks too fast or uses too many technical terms, you can say, "I didn't catch that. Can you say it again more slowly?" Notice how this is different from "I don't understand." It points to the specific problem, the speed or clarity. People usually respond well when you let them know what's going on. They'll slow down, repeat the phrase, or give more details. That helps both of you. Another variation I love is, "I think I understand the main idea, but I'm not sure about that last part." This is perfect when you grasp the general context, but something small confused you. It helps you avoid repeating information you already know, and it lets the other person focus on what really needs to be explained. Again, it's all about keeping the conversation alive and respectful. If you're learning in a classroom or listening to a podcast and you hear something unfamiliar, you might ask, "Could you explain that in another way?" This is another polite and useful phrase. It shows that you want to learn, and it gives the speaker permission to explore different words or examples to help you. Sometimes we don't get something simply because of the words used, and hearing the same idea in a slightly different way can make all the difference. There's also, "Can you walk me through that step by step?" This is very helpful in work or technical settings when someone is describing a process or a task. Instead of saying, "I'm lost," you're inviting them to guide you through the sequence. It's respectful, it's proactive, and it helps you follow along without making anyone feel awkward. And here's a really gentle one. "I'm not familiar with that. Could you explain?" This works well when someone uses a cultural reference or specific vocabulary that you haven't encountered before. You're being honest, but in a way that invites a response. You're letting them know you're interested, even if the term is new to you. Each of these phrases has a similar goal: to keep the conversation moving, to show your willingness to learn, and to maintain respect and connection with the person you're talking to. You don't have to memorize all of them today. Just pick one or two that feel natural to you and start using them in your conversations. The more you practice, the more confident you'll feel, and the more natural your English will become. What I really want you to take from this is that you're allowed to not understand something. That's normal. That's how we learn. But the way you respond when you don't understand makes a huge difference. It shapes the kind of learner you become and the kind of conversations you have. So next time you're stuck, don't shut down. Ask a question. Keep the dialogue going. That's how fluency grows, one honest moment at a time. When I first started learning languages myself, I noticed that the real progress didn't come from just studying grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary lists. It came when I began using the language, even if I wasn't completely sure about every word I said. That's the idea I want to share with you today. How to practice those useful phrases we talked about in a way that feels natural, not forced. I know it can feel intimidating to speak when you're not confident, but I promise you, there are easy ways to make these expressions a natural part of how you communicate in English. Let's start with something simple. If you've already learned a few helpful phrases to replace "I don't understand," you're on the right track. But knowing them is only the beginning. To truly benefit from these phrases, you need to practice them in real situations. I don't need to wait for a perfect moment. In fact, the best time to practice is when you're already a little uncertain, because those are the moments when you'd normally say, "I don't understand." Instead, that's your chance to use a new phrase. One great place to start is during conversation classes or language exchanges. If you're working with a tutor, a teacher, or even a language partner, let them know you're trying to practice new expressions. For example, instead of stopping the conversation when something isn't clear, try saying, "Could you rephrase that?" Or, "Can you explain that in a different way?" This keeps the conversation flowing and shows your partner that you're engaged. It also gives you the practice you need in a natural, low-pressure setting. If you're not in a class or don't have a language partner right now, don't worry. There are other ways to practice. One method I always recommend is using these phrases while watching videos in English, especially interviews, podcasts, or shows with natural dialogue. When you hear something you don't understand, pause the video and say out loud, "What does that mean exactly?" Or, "Could you give me an example?" I know the video won't answer you, but that's not the point. You're training your brain to respond automatically in English, and that repetition is incredibly powerful. Another useful idea is to practice these phrases in writing. You can do this through online chats, email, or even social media. If you're chatting with someone and they say something that confuses you, use one of the new phrases. For example, type, "I'm not sure I follow, could you say that another way?" Or, "Can you give an example of what you mean?" This gives you real-life writing practice and builds confidence, especially because writing usually gives you a bit more time to think before responding. Now here's a little challenge I want to give you. Choose just 2 of your favorite phrases, the ones you feel most comfortable saying. Don't try to learn 10 at once, just pick 2. Write them down somewhere you'll see them often. On your phone, your notebook, your mirror. Then, for the next 7 days, focus on using those 2 phrases as much as possible. Whether you're in a conversation, writing a message, or watching a video, try to find moments where those expressions would fit. The goal is to make them feel like second nature, so that when the moment comes, you won't have to stop and think. You'll just say it naturally. This 1-week focus approach is something I've used with many students, and it works beautifully. After just a few days, the hesitation disappears. The phrases stop feeling foreign. And more importantly, the fear of speaking or asking questions starts to go away too. You become more confident because you're not just memorizing English, you're living it. I also want you to notice how these expressions give you control in a conversation. Instead of feeling lost or shutting down when something is unclear, you now have the tools to guide the conversation back to a place where you feel comfortable. That's a powerful feeling. You're no longer just reacting, you're participating, engaging, and leading the interaction in a way that helps you grow. And let's not forget how good this feels socially. People appreciate when you make an effort to understand them. When you say, "Can you rephrase that?" Or, "What do you mean exactly?" You're showing interest. You're showing that you care about what's being said. That creates a better connection, whether you're talking to a teacher, a friend, or a colleague. Communication becomes smoother and more meaningful, and your confidence increases with every successful exchange. It's also important to reflect on your progress. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to think, did I use one of my phrases today? How did it feel? Was it easy? Was it a bit awkward? Did it help me understand better? These small moments of reflection will reinforce your learning and help you adjust your practice if needed. If a phrase doesn't feel quite right for you, it's okay to try a different one the next week. The key is to keep practicing and not give up after the first few tries. Remember, every time you replace "I don't understand" with something more specific or interactive, you're developing real-world fluency. It's not just about sounding better, it's about building real communication skills. The more you practice in real or realistic situations, the more natural these phrases will become. Over time, they won't feel like phrases you learned. They'll feel like your own words. So as you move through your week, keep these ideas close. Practice with intention. Use these phrases to stay engaged, ask questions, and take ownership of your English learning. The difference it makes is more than just linguistic. It's personal, empowering, and real. I want to share with you the story of Alex from Toronto because it's a perfect example of how small changes in the way we speak can make a big difference in our confidence and communication. Alex is a young professional working in a busy tech company, and like many of us, he found himself nervous when talking with colleagues from different countries. English was the common language, but even then, he often felt lost in conversations. He would hear something, and when he didn't fully catch it, his automatic response was to say, "I don't understand." What happened after that was exactly what many of us have experienced. The conversation would stall, or the other person would look at him awkwardly, unsure if they should explain more or just move on. That left Alex feeling more anxious and less motivated to speak up the next time. One day, during a team meeting, Alex decided to try something different. Instead of saying, "I don't understand," he chose to say, "Can you say that in another way?" At first, he felt a little awkward because it was a new phrase for him. But almost immediately, he noticed the reaction from his colleagues changed. Instead of pulling back, they smiled and took the time to rephrase what they had said. This simple shift made the atmosphere lighter and more welcoming. The conversations became less like tests where he had to prove his English and more like real interactions where everyone was trying to understand each other better. What I love about Alex's story is that it shows how using natural and polite phrases can open doors in communication. Saying, "Can you say that in another way?" invites the speaker to help you without making it feel like a problem or failure. It's a way of saying, "I'm interested, I want to understand, but I need a little help." That's so much more powerful than the phrase, "I don't understand," which can sometimes sound like you're shutting down or giving up. Alex's new phrase gave him a tool to stay in the conversation and build connections. Over time, Alex practiced this phrase, not only in meetings but also in casual chats with coworkers during lunch or coffee breaks. He found that people were generally happy to explain and repeat things differently, and he grew more comfortable asking for clarification. This small habit became part of his natural way of speaking English. He no longer felt like an outsider, or someone who was always struggling. Instead, he was an active participant who could keep up with the flow of conversations, ask questions, and share his ideas without fear. This change in Alex's communication style also helped him professionally. When he spoke up more and showed willingness to understand, his colleagues started to respect him more. He wasn't just the quiet person in the background anymore. He became a valued team member who contributed ideas and engaged in discussions. This helped him grow his confidence not only in English but also in his role at work. It's amazing how mastering just a few simple phrases can influence your entire experience, both socially and professionally. I want you to think about your own experiences. How often have you found yourself saying, "I don't understand," and felt like the conversation stopped right there? What if, like Alex, you had a phrase ready to use that kept the conversation going? Something polite, simple, and effective that invites the other person to explain in a way that makes sense to you? Phrases like, "Can you say that in another way?" Or, "Could you explain that a bit more?" are not only easy to remember but also show that you are eager to learn and communicate better. If you try this out, you might notice that people respond more positively than you expect. They want to help you understand because they appreciate your effort. Sometimes all it takes is a small change in how you ask for clarification to turn a stressful moment into an opportunity to connect. You'll feel less nervous and more in control, just like Alex did. Another important part of Alex's story is that he gave himself permission to not understand everything right away. That's such a key mindset in language learning. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say you need something repeated or explained differently. The important thing is to keep the conversation alive. When you do, you'll be surprised at how much more you can learn and how quickly your confidence grows. So, if you're feeling nervous or stuck during conversations, remember Alex from Toronto. Try using, "Can you say that in another way?" Next time you need help understanding something, notice how it changes the way people react and how it makes you feel more comfortable and natural. This simple phrase can turn a moment of confusion into a moment of connection. It's a tool that helps you stay present in the conversation and shows that you care about understanding. The more you use phrases like this, the more you'll notice your English becoming smoother and your conversations becoming more enjoyable. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing to try, ask questions, and keep talking. That's the real key to fluency, and Alex's story reminds us of that beautifully. One thing I want to talk about today is a very common mistake that many English learners make, and that is falling into what I call the all or nothing trap. This is the idea that you either have to understand everything someone says perfectly, or you don't understand anything at all. It's a mindset that can really block your progress and make conversations feel intimidating or impossible. I know many people who get stuck because they believe if they don't catch every single word or phrase, then the entire message is lost, and they give up trying to follow along. But that's simply not true. Understanding a language, especially in real-life conversations, is rarely perfect or complete. Instead, it's about catching as much as you can and using smart strategies to fill in the gaps. When you're listening to someone speak English, it's normal not to catch every word. Accents, speed, and unfamiliar vocabulary can all make it harder to understand everything. But that doesn't mean you should stop trying or say, "I don't understand," as if the whole conversation is a mystery. Instead, I encourage you to pay attention to the parts you do understand and use those as clues. Even if you miss some words, you probably understand the main idea or some important details. Recognizing this can help you feel more confident and less overwhelmed. For example, you might hear a sentence and understand the beginning or the general topic, but the last part is unclear. Instead of saying, I don't understand, and stopping there, you can say something like, I didn't catch everything, but I think you're saying, and then repeat what you did understand. This shows you're actively listening and engaged in the conversation. It also gives the other person a chance to confirm if you're right or to clarify what you missed. It's a much better way to keep the dialogue flowing and show your interest. I remember when I first started teaching English learners, I noticed many students were afraid to speak or ask questions unless they understood perfectly. This all-or-nothing attitude was holding them back because they felt embarrassed or frustrated when they didn't catch everything. But once they learned to recognize the parts they understood and ask strategic questions, everything changed. They became more active listeners, and their conversations became more natural and enjoyable. They stopped seeing gaps in understanding as failures and instead saw them as normal parts of learning. One very useful phrase I like to teach is, I didn't catch everything, but I think you're saying. This simple sentence does two important things. First, it tells the other person that you're trying your best and that you understood part of what they said. Second, it invites them to help you by confirming or correcting your understanding. When you use this phrase, you are practicing active listening. Active listening means you're not just waiting for your turn to speak. You're really focusing on the message, trying to understand as much as possible, and showing that you want to communicate well. Another way to avoid the all-or-nothing trap is by breaking the conversation into smaller pieces. Instead of waiting until the speaker finishes a long explanation, you can ask questions or make comments about smaller parts as they talk. This helps you process the information step by step and makes it easier to understand and respond. For example, if someone is telling you about their job and you catch the part where they say, I work in marketing, but don't understand the rest, you can say, so you work in marketing. What kind of marketing do you do? This keeps the conversation active and gives you a chance to learn more. It's also helpful to repeat or paraphrase what you understand. You can say things like, so you're talking about a new project at work? Or, if I'm correct, you mean that the meeting was postponed? This kind of feedback lets the speaker know you're paying attention and helps avoid misunderstandings. It also encourages them to explain things more clearly or differently if needed. I want you to think about your own conversations in English. How often have you felt stuck because you thought, if I don't understand everything, I might as well say nothing? This is the all-or-nothing trap, and it's something I want you to leave behind. Learning a language is a journey, and conversations are part of that learning process. Every time you try to listen, speak, and ask questions, you are getting better, even if you don't understand everything perfectly. One practical tip is to prepare some phrases in advance that you can use when you don't fully understand. For example, besides, I didn't catch everything, but I think you're saying, you can say, could you explain that last part again? Or, what do you mean by that? These phrases show you're interested and want to keep the conversation going, even when things get tricky. Remember, the goal is not perfection. It's connection. It's about sharing ideas, learning from each other, and enjoying the process of communication. When you stop expecting to understand every word and instead focus on the parts you do understand, you open yourself up to much more effective and enjoyable conversations. I want to encourage you to practice this mindset whenever you're listening to English, whether in meetings, classes, videos, or casual chats. Try to catch key words or phrases and build your understanding step by step. Don't wait to understand everything perfectly before you respond. Use the phrases I mentioned to keep the flow going. This approach will help you become a more confident and active communicator. Breaking the all-or-nothing habit takes time, but it's one of the most valuable shifts you can make in your English learning journey. It helps reduce frustration, keeps you engaged, and encourages you to ask questions and participate more. The more you practice this, the more natural it will feel, and the more fluent your English will become. So next time you feel like you're missing too much in a conversation, remember that understanding a little is better than understanding nothing. Use that to your advantage. Show what you understand, ask questions about the parts you don't, and keep the conversation alive. This will make your English learning more enjoyable and effective, and you'll notice yourself improving faster than you expected. Today, I want to invite you to take a moment and really think about what we've talked about so far. Imagine yourself in your next English conversation. Maybe it's with a colleague, a friend, or even someone you meet online. Now, ask yourself, which of the phrases we discussed today could help you feel more confident and keep the conversation flowing? It might be something as simple as saying, "Could you say that again?" Or, "I didn't catch the last part, can you explain?" These small phrases may seem easy or even a little basic, but they have real power to change how you communicate. When you're learning a language, it's natural to want to be perfect right away, to understand every word and to respond without hesitation. But that's a lot to expect, and it can create pressure that makes it harder to speak up. Instead, I want you to focus on one small change you can make today, one phrase or one new reaction you can try the next time you don't understand something. This kind of daily practice, even if it's just a tiny step, will help you build your confidence and fluency over time. Think about how many conversations you've had where you felt stuck because you weren't sure how to say, "I don't understand," in a better way, or maybe you just stayed silent. What if you chose one new phrase today that you can use instead? Maybe it's, "Can you explain that part again?" Or, "What does that mean exactly?" These phrases don't just fill a gap in your vocabulary. They change your mindset from feeling stuck to feeling curious and engaged. I want you to remember that learning English is a journey made up of many small moments like this. Every time you try a new phrase or way of responding, you're training your brain to think in English and to approach conversations with a positive attitude. This is how you build real fluency, not by avoiding difficult moments, but by meeting them with simple, effective tools that keep you connected to the speaker. When you practice these small changes regularly, you start to notice a big difference. Conversations don't feel as scary, you feel more in control, and you learn more naturally. Instead of being afraid to say anything because you might not understand, you become someone who navigates challenges confidently. This is how your English improves not just in school or classes, but in real life, in meetings, social events, travel, and even casual chats. So, I want you to take a moment right now and pick one phrase from today's episode that you feel comfortable with or excited to try. Maybe write it down or say it out loud. Then, in your next English conversation, use that phrase the first time you feel uncertain or confused. Notice how it changes the flow of the conversation and how it makes you feel more connected and less worried. If you're feeling a bit nervous about trying new phrases, remember that it's perfectly okay. Every learner feels that way sometimes. What matters is that you try and that you give yourself permission to make mistakes and learn from them. Each attempt is progress. I encourage you to practice these phrases not just once, but every time you speak English. Make it a habit to express yourself clearly even when you're unsure. This habit will become part of your natural way of communicating, and soon you won't need to think twice before asking for clarification or explaining what you understood. Also, think about how your attitude toward misunderstandings can shift. Instead of seeing a gap in understanding as a problem, see it as an opportunity to learn and connect more deeply. This mindset will make you a better listener and speaker, because you're actively involved in the conversation and eager to learn. Remember, language learning isn't about perfection. It's about connection and progress. Every conversation you have is a chance to practice, grow, and improve. By changing how you respond when you don't understand something, you open the door to more conversations, more learning, and more confidence. Take this reflection seriously, because what you decide to change today can have a ripple effect on your entire English learning journey. It's those small daily changes, trying a new phrase, asking a question, showing your understanding, that build your fluency and make you a more confident communicator. So, as you go about your day, keep this question with you. Which phrase will you choose to use next time you don't understand something? Which approach feels most natural for you? How can you turn a moment of confusion into an opportunity for growth? I believe in your ability to make these changes and to become the English speaker you want to be. You've already taken an important step by listening to this episode and thinking about these ideas. Now, it's time to put them into practice and see how much your conversations can improve with just a little shift in language and mindset. You don't have to change everything at once. Just start with one phrase, one moment of courage, and watch how that simple change can open new doors for you in English. Keep practicing, keep asking questions, and keep growing. Your fluency is waiting for you, one small step at a time. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I want to remind you that every person who learns a language faces moments of doubt and uncertainty. It's completely normal, and it's part of the process. When you feel stuck or unsure, remember that this doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're growing. It means you're pushing yourself to improve, and that's what matters most. Speaking a language isn't about being perfect or understanding every word immediately. It's about connection, connecting with others, sharing ideas, and building relationships. It's about being brave enough to say something, even if it's not exactly right, and then learning from that experience. Each conversation you have, each question you ask, and each time you try a new phrase, you're taking a step forward. I know it can feel frustrating when you don't understand everything, or when you worry that you're holding up the conversation. But the truth is, most people appreciate when you show interest and try to keep the conversation going, even if you need a little help along the way. Using phrases like the ones we talked about today will help you feel more comfortable and confident, and that confidence will shine through in your speaking. Remember, practicing these phrases isn't just about memorizing words, it's about changing the way you think about communication. Instead of stopping the conversation with "I don't understand," you're opening a door to more dialogue, more learning, and more connection. And that's a huge step for anyone learning a new language. I'm so grateful you chose to listen today and that you're committed to improving your English. The best way to get better is to keep practicing regularly, to be patient with yourself, and to celebrate every little success along the way. Whether you're using these phrases in meetings, classes, or casual chats, each time you try, you get closer to your goal. If you found these tips helpful, I encourage you to listen to other episodes where we explore more ways to build your confidence and fluency. Learning a language is a journey, and I'm here to support you every step of the way. And finally, remember, never stop practicing. You're doing better than you think. Keep growing, keep speaking, and keep believing in yourself. You've got this.